With former President Donald Trump having won the presidency and the Republican Party having flipped the Senate, the U.S. House remains the last branch of Congress that is not decided at this moment in time. If Republicans are able to win the House of Representatives, Republicans will have unchecked power in the next 2 years. By contrast, if Democrats are able to actually flip the House of Representatives, they can end up having some control in the Trump administration. Thus, the control of the House is absolutely imperative for both parties. So in today's video, we'll be looking at each of these uncalled 23 uncalled House races and analyzing who will win each one of these races, and ultimately who will win the House of Representatives in 2024. So let's get started. I'm going to go in geographical order, starting from the west to the east. But starting off here with Washington's 4th District, where Dan Newhouse, the incumbent, is facing Republican challenger Jerrod Sesler. Now this is probably the least impactful of all of the House districts, because this is the only district out of the 24 uncalled districts that have two candidates of the same party going against each other. However, for Donald Trump, this is probably the most consequential race. Dan Newhouse is one of the 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Donald Trump, and one of the 2 Republicans who are still in the House after voting for impeachment. The other 8 either lost their Republican primaries or decided not to run at all because of their decision. Now, Dan Newhouse is in a very conservative district. Some people thought that he was not going to make it, but right now he's up by 4.6 percentage points. Vote-wise, he's up by about 10,000 votes with 80% reported, which is a really good number. Additionally, some of the trends have actually been trending towards Dan Newhouse. The last time I checked, this was 51.5% Newhouse. Now he's moved ahead to 52.3%. Thus, this is a district where we can essentially characterize it as called Republican. There are 2 Republicans, and Newhouse is a heavy favored. Quite a few sources have actually called this race for Newhouse already. Let's go to Washington's 3rd. In Washington's 3rd District, as you can see on the New York Times, it says that Representative Marie Gutierrez, a first-time Democrat representing a rural working-class district, is considered the most vulnerable Democrat in the House. However, the quote-unquote the most vulnerable Democrat in the House, which by the way I predicted would lose, is right now up by 15,000 votes, with 92% of the votes tabulated. Quite a few sources have again called this race for Mary Gutierrez, and that is also my prediction. She's doing better than what she did in 2022 in a rematch against Joe Kent in every county with 100% of the votes in. She's doing about 2% better in Lewis County, about 2% better in Kamala County. She's doing a little bit better in Pacific County as well, so I definitely expect Gutierrez to win, especially because the bulk of the remaining vote is from Clark County, a county that she's leading right now by 14%. I expect the final margin to be around 4%, given the fact that there's really not a lot of vote left. There's roughly 30,000 votes left, and right now the difference is 15,000. Joe Kent is not going to make up 75% of the vote in the remaining precincts. So right now, I'm going to pretty much put this as safe Democrat. It's uncalled according to New York Times, but I think it's pretty fair to say that this is a 100% Democratic district at this moment in time. Now we can move on to Oregon's 5th Congressional District, where incumbent Lori DeSantis the Reamer is facing a pretty stiff challenge from Janelle Bunham. Now, not many sources have called this race, but it looks really good for the Democratic challenger. For one thing, she's up right now by nearly 10,000 votes, with 83% reported. There's roughly about 80,000 votes left, but probably won't be enough for Lori DeSantis Reamer to actually hold this number down, because she needs to win those votes by roughly 13%, according to my own calculations. Additionally, most of the Republican areas are all in. Lane County right now, this is the most populated Republican county in this congressional district, is 92% in, and she's up by roughly 26% there. She might get a maximum of like 2,000 to 3,000 votes here, and she might get maybe a maximum of a net 1,000 votes from Marion County, so she really doesn't have a lot of votes to count on. By contrast, Janelle Bunham, the Democrat, has still a little bit of vote to hope on in Clackamas County. There's a bit of vote from Deschutes County, which is where Ben is located, and also there's a little bit of vote, probably around 5,000 to 6,000 votes left from Monmouth County, which is right next to Portland, which is definitely going to favor the Democrat. I expect her to win by 3 to 4%, the Democrat, I mean, and I really don't think that Laura Chavez de Raymer has any shot of winning re-election. The remaining votes go to favor the Democrat, and she's already down by a pretty substantial margin for a House district standard. Thus, this district, I'm also going to characterize this as safe Democrat. It's not called, but it's not going to go red. Now going to some of the districts in Arizona, we're going to leave California for last because there's a lot to explain there. Now for Arizona's 2nd District, Eli Crane against Jonathan Nez. I'm not sure why New York Times has not called this district. 87% is in. The Republican incumbent is up by 30,000 votes. There's like 50,000 votes left, so why are you not calling this? Like, the areas that are actually not reporting right now are more or less, for example, Yavapai County. This is the most populated county across the district. This is only 73% in, and Eli Crane has a 2-to-1 edge in that, essentially that county. So the remaining votes actually Republican leading, and Jonathan Nez has nothing to really hope for. This is a very conservative district. The incumbent there back in 2020, Tom O'Halloran, actually lost this district by 8, so Eli Crane is not going to lose. I'm also going to put this in essentially safe Republican. Now going to the next district in this map here, that would be Arizona's 1st Congressional District, where Republican David Streicher is facing Democrat Amish Shah. Now, a few sources have also called this race for David Streicher, though most have remained this as undecided. Some of the news networks definitely call this prematurely, but right now I think David Streicher is definitely heavily favored to win, because the vote in Arizona has been definitely moving in the Republican direction. On election night, Amish Shah was up, David Streicher took a 1% lead, then he took like a 3% lead, and now it's up to about 5%. There's no way Amish Shah could really feasibly make that vote up. And Donald Trump's up in the state by several percent. In 2022, though, this was one of the most competitive congressional districts in that election, but this time around, though, Donald Trump's overperformance in Maricopa County seems to have helped David Streicher. Streicher will probably win in this district, and I'm right now going to put it as likely Republican. Next up is Arizona's 4th Congressional District. Now, this is also a district that's not really all that competitive. Incumbent Democrat Greg Stanton seems to have a actually pretty competitive race, at least for Arizona 4th District standards. Again, this is kind of due to the fact that Donald Trump is overperforming in Arizona compared to expectations. He's up by 6%, while reality by final projection had him up by about 2 to 3, and the mainstream media essentially had that race as a toss-up. Now, Greg Stanton still will probably end up hanging on. It's not much of a surprise. I think Greg Stanton's race should be called already, but it's not. It's going to be considered safe blue. Now, I accidentally touched that district, so I'm going to put it back as safe Republican. There's another final district that remains uncalled right now, being Arizona's 6th District, and this is the really only competitive district. Juan Cicomani against Christine Engel. This is a rematch of 2022. Engel only lost by a fraction of 1% back then, or about 6,000 votes. And this time around, though, the district is also pretty competitive. Now, right now, this district is pretty hard to project theoretically, but the votes have been trending in Juan Cicomani's favor. Additionally, Trump definitely overperformed expectations in the state and across it, and additionally, Juan Cicomani is more moderate as an incumbent, which should help him. In the counties now fully reported, Graham County and Greeley County, Cicomani is doing much better than his numbers in 2022, and Engel's numbers in Pima County have been on the decline. So if I had to project this race, I definitely give it to Juan Cicomani. I'm going to put this as leaning towards the Republicans. I'm not 100% confident, but if I would be one of these two candidates, I'd definitely be in Juan Cicomani's shoes. Now going to Colorado's 8th District, where Gabe Evans, the Republican, is actually putting up a pretty strong challenge against the incumbent Democrat in this suburban Denver district. Adams County is the base of the district, and then Wells County is the Republican area, followed by a little bit of vote from Laramie County. Now, this district was not expected to be all that competitive. Democrats generally did pretty well in 2020, and 2022 in some of these Denver suburbs, and it was expected that Harris would do quite well here as well. However, she's underperforming in some of these suburban areas, which also includes the suburbs of Colorado. Thus, it does look like the Democrats could face a little bit of trouble here, with the Democrat at about 48% and Gabe Evans at 49%, with about a 2,500 vote spread. Now, 85% of the vote is in, which means roughly there's about 40 to 45,000 votes outstanding. And if you look at the distribution of the remaining votes, they're roughly about the same percentage-wise in Adams County and Wells County. as compared to the previous votes. And again, the Democrats actually going the wrong direction. She was ahead a little bit earlier today, now she's behind by a little bit, so that's not great news. This is definitely one of the harder districts to predict, because I personally had the Democrat winning here, but if I had to predict it based on the numbers we currently know, I'd probably give this race to Gabe Evans by a pretty slim margin. So right now I'm going to put this race as tilting towards the Republicans, which does boost the Republicans right now to as the favorites to win at least 260 congressional districts, and we still have a ton to get to. Next up, we go to the state of Alaska, which historically is not that competitive, however has a competitive House election in 2024. Democratic incumbent Mary Peltola is desperately trying to hang on against Republican Nick Begich. Now, Alaska's pretty interesting. They have ranked choice voting, and right now, none of the candidates have above 50% of the votes, which means the round could end up with a ranked choice system. Now, historically, Democrats generally do better in the late arriving votes in Alaska, and as you can see right now, any ballots in the United States have until November 15th to arrive, and overseas absentee ballots have until November 20th. And there's still about 24% of the votes left. I expect those votes to favor Peltola, so that should bring this district down to about 1 to 2% in favor of Begich. Now the question becomes really, what would happen with ranked choice voting? Generally, Democrats, again, there's a Democratic candidate, they're 2,483 votes, assuming that the voters who voted for him or her actually decided to put a second choice option, that would obviously be Mary Peltola. So Peltola should gain a little bit more of the remaining vote from this Democrat. However, the Alaska independents is pretty hard to predict because, again, they don't really have a Democrat or Republican next to their name. But based on my experience, the Alaska independence vote generally favors the Republican Party slightly to the Democratic Party. So with that all being said, I think Nick Begich will probably finish with about 50.5% in ranked choice voting to Peltola at about 49.5%. This is very close. I have pretty much no confidence in what I'm saying, but if I had to bet money, I bet it on Nick Begich. Mary Peltola is a pretty well-liked incumbent, but in a national environment as bad as this one, and in a state as red for the Republican Party as Alaska, you're probably going to see the Democratic incumbent lose re-election. So the state of Alaska right now is tilting towards the Republican Party, in my opinion. Now going to Louisiana's 6th district, where again, it's about ranked choice voting, which is creating this essentially chaos. You can see that the Democrat here is up against the Republican by 13%, and the combined Democratic vote is up against the Republican Party by about 25%. So why is this race even uncalled? Again, ranked choice voting is pretty much to blame here. Although the Democrats will clearly win the runoff, if the Democrats end up below 50%, there will be a runoff. Nevertheless, the Democrat here is at 50.8%, and essentially all the votes have been tabulated. I think they probably should call this right now for Democrats. The Democrat in this race is still considerably above the runoff line with all the votes in, so I would say this race should be called for a Democratic Party at this moment in time. The same cannot be said for Iowa's 1st district, where the Republican incumbent Marriott Miller Meeks is up against a Democrat by just 0.2%. If you want to go down to 2 decimal places, it goes down to 0.19%. This is not the first race Marriott Miller Meeks has been involved in that is super competitive. In 2020, she won by a margin of, get this, 6 votes out of more than 400,000 tabulated. So this is definitely not MMM's the first experience with a competitive race, but again, as an incumbent, you're supposed to do a bit better. Now, this race is definitely very competitive. So there's some news sources, specifically Decision Desk HQ, which has called this, and I would consider that irresponsible because, again, this is within 0.25%. There's going to be a recount. There could be lawsuits. There could be some disqualification ballots. There could be more ballots to be counted if those ballots are ruled valid, and so on and so forth. So I don't believe this race should be called, though Marriott Miller Meeks probably has like a 90 to 95% chance of victory, and thus this is considered likely Republican. Another district that's uncalled because there could be a recount is Ohio's 9th district. Marcy Kaptur in 2020 defeated the Republican candidate there, J.R. Majewski, by about 13%. However, J.R. Majewski was a pretty extreme Republican who essentially did not have very high favorability ratings, and thus Marcy Kaptur was able to cruise to victory. Derek Marin is a much more popular Republican, at least compared to J.R. Majewski, and right now this race is uncalled because it's within recount territory. I think Marcy Kaptur will win because again the spread is a little bit more for a recount to overcome. Realistically, a recount will not change by the results by more than 0.05%, and right now 0.32% is a bit too much. I would still advise against calling a race like this. Just wait on for another day or two, but Marcy Kaptur is pretty much favored to win this district, and the margin there is a bit more than Iowa's first congressional district, and thus I'll put this as safe blue, but I think they should probably wait on for a day or two before they call this district. With a dozen races to project at this moment in time, let's go on to the state of Maryland. Maryland's 6th district was vacated by David Trode, who had an unsuccessful bid for Senate, and now Angela Alsobrooks is the Democratic nominee and the next senator from Maryland. Anyhow, the district that he left is Maryland's 6th district, and Neil Perrott was also the Republican candidate in 2022. Now, this district, in my opinion, should be called for Democrats already. The remaining vote is essentially all in Montgomery County, which is 70-30 Democratic. Frederick County, the remaining vote there is also favoring Democrats. On election night, Frederick County was 50-50, now it's 53-47, and the remaining vote I heard was also heavily Democratic. The Republican areas, Garrett County, very sparsely populated, 95% in, Allegheny a bit more vote there, but not a lot, and Washington County, the base of the Republican support is also 94% in. So the remaining vote is really from Montgomery. Democrats are going to benefit hugely there. This district is a no-brainer. It's definitely favoring Democrats, and I think it should be called. Going to Maine's 2nd district here, Jared Forrest Golden, he's a Democratic incumbent, he's more working class, and he gives that vibe. While Donald Trump won this district by nearly 10%, Golden might still be able to hang on. Now, there's a few precincts that have not reported data. Some of the precincts actually don't have a single vote, which is maybe why they're not reporting. You can see some of these precincts are really sparsely populated. I did the math, essentially. I actually went precinct by precinct. I estimate there's roughly about 1,000 to 2,000 votes left. So there's not really going to be enough votes for Austin Throughout to actually overcome Jared Golden. Theoretically, even if he wins essentially 90% of the votes. However, again, Maine 2nd has ranked choice voting. The remaining vote will probably favor the Republican, thus forcing this race into a ranked choice voting race. And there's about 1,000 write-ins who will probably decide who is the next representative from Maine 2nd congressional district. However, if these write-ins did not actually put in any of these two candidates, which I suspect probably most of them didn't because of the fact that if they really wanted to vote for one of these two candidates, they probably would have done it on the first ballot instead of writing someone's name in, maybe their own name, maybe Donald Trump, maybe Kamala Harris, we don't really know. I'm assuming that pretty much none of them actually colored in one of these two candidates, and thus Jared Golden will probably win, though the margin is super close and there's still some precincts that have not reported their results. Thus I'm putting it into Democratic. There's too many uncertain factors in this race. And now we go to California, where there's actually 10 uncalled races. That represents almost half of the entire uncalled House races in the United States as of right now. And by the way, California counts their votes ridiculously slow. We're still at 63% reported 4 days after Election Day. I would just advise California to get their stuff together and start counting more votes. Now, one of the background lines I want to put in here is that Kamala Harris is doing better with the late arriving ballots. Essentially, on election night, Kamala Harris was only up in California by about 16. Now she's up by closer to 19. And it looks like that she's going to keep gaining ground because Biden did win the state by 29. I don't think she'll win the state by 29, but since she was a former senator from the state, and because, again, a 10-point overperformance is pretty drastic, I think Harris will probably win the state overall by like 23. Just to keep that in mind, to explain some of my future House predictions for the remaining races. I'm going to start off here with the 22nd district, where Republican David Valadao is heavily favored against Rudy Salas. Valadao decided to impeach Donald Trump. He was able to win his open primary in both this election and 2022. Now, Rudy Salas, this is the second or third time Salas has went against David Valadao, and it doesn't look too good right now for Salas. He's down by 9%. As I previously explained, I expect the margin to tighten, but since the district is actually pretty low turnout, there's only about 50,000 votes left, despite the fact that only about 115,000 is counted. and thus the 10,000 vote lead is pretty impressive for Valadao, and I expect him to hang on. This district has been called by some sources. I'm going to put this essentially as safe Republican. The gap is just too large for any candidate to feasibly overcome, in my opinion. Now, just as an update, Democrats have 200 called races, Republicans have 212, Democrats are leading and called in 207, while Republicans are leading or called in 219. Now let's go to California and its remaining 9 districts. Let's start off here with the 9th district, Josh Harder against Kevin Lincoln. It does seem like that Harder will probably win. This is a district where Democrats had a 95% chance of winning on 538, and right now Harder is only up by 2.4%. However, as I previously explained, the remaining votes should favor Josh Harder. Additionally, he's been moving in kind of like the right direction, and the fact is, this is a more Democratic district. The remaining votes should favor Democrats because it's more or less the mail-in ballots. And Harder historically has not had that many tough races, so Harder should be able to pretty much prevail. I'm going to put this as likely Democrat just because there's more votes to count and some uncertainty. Nevertheless, Harder should be able to prevail. In the 21st district, Jim Costa is only up by a point. Now I say only because if you look at 538's forecast, their most likely scenario was that Costa was going to win by 25%, and he had a 1,000 out of 1,000 chance of victory. But guess what? Right now, the most competitive projection, by the way, had him up by 3%, and the second most competitive projection out of 1,000 had Costa up by 4.5. But right now, with all these votes being tabulated, Costa is only up by 1. It just shows how inaccurate some of these forecasts can be at times. Anyhow, Jim Costa, disregarding like the inaccurate forecast, so on and so forth, because this is a historically more Democratic district, more of the vote is in from the Republican part of the district, Tall R County, with 75% in, as opposed to Fresno County, which 60% in. Jim Costa historically has not had many competitive races. All of those factors combined, the Republican is actually in a rematch with Costa, where the Republican lost by 8% in 2022. So this race is not really considered all that good for the Republican Party. I'm going to have to give this race to Jim Costa. Still though, 538's numbers definitely way off. Costa is not going to win by 25 or even 50 points. That's ridiculous. Now going to the next race here, which would be John Durate against Adam Gray. Durate had the most competitive race by raw vote count in 2022. Adam Gray is in a rematch, and right now the race is still very competitive. Durate starting off with like a 4% lead, it's going down to about 2.5%, and Gray's definitely moving the right direction. Additionally, 538 did give him, the Democrat, an 85% chance of winning this district. The problem here is that when I'm looking at some of these counties here, Gray is not necessarily at the number he should be if he's actually winning. Now, albeit there's like still about 80 to 90,000 votes to count, if not a little bit more than that, and all of these votes are mail-in ballots, so it's not going to be hard for him to make up a 3,000 vote gap. It's really hard to predict this district, but based on some of the pre-election models and what I know about the California's overall picture, I'm going to give this race to Adam Gray, the Democrat, albeit by a tilt margin. I'm not super confident in my statement, but I think that Adam Gray should be able to win if the things I'm considering are correct. Now for the 27th district, between Mike Garcia and George Whitesides. Mike Garcia has the image of a moderate Republican, though he did vote to throw out the 2020 presidential election results from Pennsylvania. Whitesides is definitely one of the better candidates the Democrats could have ran, and again, Garcia is moving in the wrong direction. He was up on election day 51.5 to 48.5, now it's down to 50.19 to 49.81. It's only about less than 1,000 vote difference. It's the most competitive district right now by all the uncalled races in terms of the percentage difference. And Whitesides has been making progress batch after batch of votes, and I expect that to remain the same. Thus, I'm predicting right now that George Whitesides should be able to win. And 538 did give Whitesides about a 65% chance of winning, so I'm also going to consider that as a factor. Now let's zoom into Los Angeles to call the final 5 races based on my opinion. I'm going to start off here with the most obvious race, the 39th district. Mark Takano he should be able to win re-election. He's up by 18,000 votes. This is a very blue district. No one expects it to be competitive. The only reason it's not called is because only 60% of the votes are tabulated, and thus this district really, in my opinion, should be called. It's going to be in the safe blue column. Now going to the next district in this list here, we go to the 47th district. This used to be Katie Porter's district, but she decided to run for Senate unsuccessfully, and now it's an open seat between Dave Min and Scott Ball. Ball was leading by about 1.5% on election day, but as I've explained with the trend, Dave Min has been able to catch up in the most recent update. Now he's leading by about 1,000 votes. It's hard to see Ball win because of the fact that, again, the remaining votes are largely essentially mail-in ballots. There are going to be a few military ballots that will help the Republican Party, but it does look like that Dave Min will probably be the favored. During Times certainly had this district as leaning blue, despite the fact that they have like 5 dozen districts in toss-up. So based on all of those factors, I'm going to have to say that the Democrat Dave Min is probably favored in Katie Porter's former district. Now we go to the next district on this list here. That would be the 49th district. Mike Levin shouldn't have that hard of a time winning re-election. San Diego is the base of the district, though Orange County right now, Kamala Harris is not doing the best in Orange County, and that could be hurting Mike Levin. Nevertheless, again, some of the more recent votes from Orange County have been shifting the county towards the Democratic Party, and so has San Diego, and Mike Levin's margin has improved from election night of essentially a toss-up, now to about D+3, so I do expect Mike Levin to be able to hang on. I put that in likely Democrat, if not safe Democrat. Now there's two final districts to consider, and the first one is the 45th district. FiveThirtyEight had this at exactly 50-50 between Michelle Steele and Derek Tran. Now, unlike some of the other districts, Michelle Steele's percentage of the vote has not necessarily been decreasing. She's been holding on at about 52 to 51% for essentially this entire election process, which indicates to me that perhaps she's going to be able to hang on. This is the part of the Orange County part of the district, so theoretically, there should be more vote coming in, and those votes should favor Derek Tran a bit more, but her slippage is not as significant as with some of the other incumbents. Now, it's really hard to predict this district because, again, it's based in Orange County. There's a little bit from Los Angeles. There's not really much information you can infer from this. I was not able to find a precinct map, so I can't really tell which precincts are not really in right now. But if I had to guess, I would guess that Michelle Steele will be able to hang on, just because there's only about, 70,000-80,000 votes left, and Michelle Steele does have a 7,000 to 8,000 vote advantage. So it takes a Democrat to probably make up like a 10% gap. The Democrat needs to win by essentially 10% in the outstanding vote to be able to win, and I really doubt that. Additionally, Michelle Steele is a relatively popular incumbent, and this district is not as blue as, say, for example, David Valadeo's district or Mike Garcia's district. So I do predict at this moment in time that Michelle Steele will probably win, though it's definitely not super certain, so I'm going to put this as tilt Republican. Now, finally, this would lead us to Ken Calvert's district. Now, Ken Calvert, this is actually a district that's pretty conservative. It's a district that Trump was actually able to win in 2020, and you're going to see Trump win this district in 2024 by like 5 to 6 points minimum. But the problem here for the Republicans is that Ken Calvert is not popular. Will Rollins, by contrast, is much more well-liked, and he's casting himself as someone who's willing to work across the aisle. And again, Calvert's just not very popular. He actually underperforms the Republican on the top of the ballot as opposed to some of the other Republican representatives from California, and that could be a problem for him. Additionally, he's also moving the wrong direction for a Republican. He was at like 52-53% on election night. Now he's down to 51.4%. However, Will Rollins was never the favored. FiveThirtyEight had this race as 2/3 Republican, and we know that FiveThirtyEight overall overestimated the Democratic Party, which is a point in Calvert's favor. Additionally, we don't really know much about the remaining vote, so we have to kind of assume that whoever's leading probably has a slightly better chance. So right now I'm giving this district to Ken Calvert by a tilt margin. Now, with all of those districts being called now, the Republicans are at 221 districts they're favored to win, and the Democrats are a total of 214. Now, I don't want to do a shameless plug here, but this is actually the same the same exact numbers I had for the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, assuming everything goes through. And Republicans, before they came into this election, had 221 seats, and Democrats had 214. So after this entire election, it looks like that the Democrats and Republicans are back to where they started. Anyways, this would give the Republicans the control of the U.S. House, which they desperately need, in order for Donald Trump to be able to do anything. Anyways, thank you for watching today's video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Even though we're going after the election, there's still a lot of elections in 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028 that I'm willing to cover, and there's still more election results we're going to go into. Thank you so much for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.